Fernando Tatis Jr. has quickly become the face of the San Diego Padres and also quite possibly the face of Major League Baseball. And everyone loves to talk about the trade the Padres made with the White Sox to receive Tatis Jr. in return for James Shields. Yes, that is part of El Niño's journey to the Padres, but that isn't the complete story. If we put his full story together, in an alternate reality, in another dimension, Fernando Tatis Jr. ends up being the starting shortstop for the Oakland A's. This is the story of how Fernando Tatis Jr. almost ended up being the face of Moneyball. This story starts in the year 2012. Now 2012 was a wild year. There was stuff trending like Coney 2012. Gangnam Style became the first video on YouTube to reach 1 billion views. And it was also the year the world was supposed to end. But all that aside, this story takes place in a small city in the middle of Missouri named Kansas City. Yes, Kansas City is in Missouri, it's not in Kansas. Now the 2012 Kansas City Royals were coming off a very, very mediocre year to say the least. They had finished the 2012 season with a record of 72-90, and that was good enough to earn them the third place spot in the American League Central Division. But the 2012 Royals gave the city of Kansas City a reason to hope. The team had saw the emergence of the three-headed monster known as Mike Moustakas, Eric Hosmer, and Salvador Perez. In 2011, Moustakas had been rated the number 7 prospect in all of MLB, and Hosmer had been rated the number 8 prospect. Those two played their first full seasons in 2012, and with Hosmer only being 22 and Moustakas only being 23, this was the core foundation for what would be a huge championship push. As for Salvador Perez, I don't think he was ever ranked in the top 100 MLB prospects. But in 2012, he quite possibly had the best season out of those three. Again, although he was only 22, he had a batting average above 300 and hit 11 home runs in 76 games. These three, combined with the budding growth of shortstop Alcides Escobar and outfielder Alex Gordon, gave the front office hope that this team was actually a championship contender. The problem was, though, they had no pitching staff at all. As a whole, the Royals pitching staff had a bottom 5 ERA in 2012. To put things into perspective, the pitcher that threw the most innings for the Royals in 2012 was Bruce Chen. Now, Bruce Chen's stats were not at all impressive, and among pitchers that threw at least 150 innings, Bruce Chen had the 6th highest ERA. It was just not a good rotation for the Kansas City Royals. And that is why, in December 2012, when the world was supposed to end, the Kansas City Royals did this.
Royals and the Tampa Bay Rays come together in a blockbuster deal on Sunday night. And look at the particulars here. James Shields will be the ace of the Kansas City Royals. He joins that rotation, as well as Wade Davis, who pitched very well out of the bullpen last year.
Now, James Shields was the key piece for the Royals in this trade. He was coming off the 2 best seasons of his life, and he had the 10th highest WAR among pitchers during that span. Unfortunately, he could never do for the Royals what they expected. Don't get me wrong, he was a beast in Kansas City. He was a mark of consistency from 2013 to 2014. He threw the 2nd most innings among any pitchers, and those innings were good innings. He was no scrub by any means. But the problem was this guy. Yes, this guy. A guy who is known as Madison Bumgarner, who looks like he could have been a farmer or a country singer in another life, but who turned out to be one of the most elite pitchers in 2014. In 2014, the last year of James Shields' contract, the Royals made it to the World Series and lost a 7-game series to the San Francisco Giants, largely because of this one man. Now, we won't get into what he did in the World Series, that's a story for another time, but the take-home point here is that the Royals were never able to win a World Series with James Shields. Now, the other half of the trade for James Shields was what the Royals gave up, and the key piece that left the Royals farm system was a man known by Wil Myers. Now, Wil Myers, he too was no scrub by any means. In 2012, he was ranked the number 3 prospect in all of Major League Baseball, only behind Jurickson Profar and Dylan Bundy. He he was ranked ahead of players like Trevor Bauer and Christian Yelich. So it's fair to say that there was no end to the hype behind this man. And to be honest, the hype was well deserved. In 2013, his first year with the Rays, he only played 88 games, but that was good enough to win the AL Rookie of the Year award. The Rays as a team finished with a record of 92-71, which is incredibly good, but in the American League East, it was only good enough for second place. And if you remember correctly, they were tied with the Texas Rangers for the second wildcard spot in the American League. They played a game 163 in which David Price balled out, claimed the last wildcard spot, won the wildcard game, and then lost in the American League Division Series to everybody's least favorite team, the Boston Red Sox. But yeah, the following season, in 2014, Wil Myers struggled with injury and again only played in 87 games and had a pretty down year. The Rays as a team also had a really bad year, finishing with a record of 77-85, and their star player, third baseman Evan Longoria, also had a down year. The problem was though, Longoria was on a huge 10-year deal, and as Tampa Bay is known for not being a huge spender, with the team struggling, the Rays decided to make some moves in 2014. At the trade deadline, they traded David Price away, and once winter came, the rumor was that Wil Myers was on the trade block. Even after a down season, Myers was still only 23 years old, and he had just come off a Rookie of the Year award campaign. So the Rays weren't actively shipping him, but just casually taking in offers. And that's when this happened.
Former mega prospect and AL Rookie of the Year, Wil Myers, is heading to San Diego.
Wil Myers became a San Diego Padre. Now, we can tell the story about how Wil Myers' career was transformed once he came to San Diego. But again, that's not the story for today. The story today is about Fernando Tatis Jr. And in order to understand that part of the story, we must look at what the Padres gave up for Wil Myers. Now for some context, the 2014 offseason was a huge shift into the Padres culture. Maybe for the first time in franchise history, they became huge spenders. For some reason, a team that finished with the 77-85 record the season before decided that they're going to make a championship push. They got Justin Upton, they got Matt Kemp, they signed James Shields. Remember him? This whole story is coming full circle now. And yes, they got Wil Myers. And in return for Wil Myers, they gave up the farm. They gave up Birch Smith, Rene Rivera, Steven Souza, Travis Ott, Joe Ross, and a player to be named later who would go by the name Trea Turner. Trea Turner was a shortstop that the Padres had drafted just 3 years before they made this trade. Now, he would turn out to be a star for the Nationals. He still is, but this is where it all comes together. 2 years later, in 2016, as part of a huge rebuild, this happened.
There is some news to get to. We've heard some rumblings over the last week plus that James Shields was going to go somewhere, and that somewhere looks to be the Chicago White Sox. As the Padres moments ago tweeted this, they have acquired Eric Johnson and Fernando Tatis Jr. from the White Sox in exchange for James Shields and cash.
Yes, the Padres got Fernando Tatis Jr. At the moment this trade happened, the White Sox had a record of 29-27 and sat third place in the American League Central, but were only 2 games back. Their lineup was strong, led by Jose Abreu, Tim Anderson, Todd Frazier, Melky Cabrera, Adam Eaton. It was hard to find a hole in this lineup. The problem though was their pitching rotation. Yes, they had Chris Sale, yes, they had Jose Quintana, but the back end of their rotation was weak. They had guys like the likes of former Padre Matt Latos. And Latos, he was not having a good year. And so in order to shore up this rotation and make a playoff push, the White Sox traded for James Shields. But the thing is, this trade should have never happened. Because if we go back to 2012 and we look at the initial trade for James Shields by the Royals should have never made that trade. They were still years away from a World Series push. And James Shields never actually helped them win a World Series. So if their front office was just a little more patient, the Rays would have never gotten Wil Myers from the Royals. And if the Rays never got Wil Myers from the Royals, then the Padres for sure wouldn't have gotten Wil Myers from the Rays. And if the Padres never trade for Wil Myers, then they never trade away Trea Turner. And if they don't trade away Trea Turner, I don't think the Padres ever asked for Fernando Tatis. You see, Trea Turner would make his debut in 2015. And before that season, he was ranked the 11th best prospect in all of Major League Baseball. And so in Trea Turner, by 2016, the Padres would have already had the shortstop for their franchise. And at that point, Fernando Tatis Jr. was a nobody. He was on nobody's prospect rankings. And to put this into perspective, he hadn't even played a professional game yet. No one knew who this guy was other than he was the son of a former Major League Baseball player. So why would the Padres ever trade for him? And so the question becomes, where does Fernando Tatis Jr. end up? And I think the answer is simple. I think he ends up on the Oakland A's. Look, the White Sox were making their playoff push, and they needed a starting pitcher. And a couple days after their trade with the Padres, their starting center fielder, Austin Jackson, would go down with injury. So if this trade with the Padres never happened for James Shields, the White Sox were looking for a starting pitcher and an outfield bat. And the Oakland A's in 2016 could provide exactly that. How do I know this? Because this already happened before. At the 2016 trade deadline, the Oakland A's traded starting pitcher Rich Hill and outfielder Josh Reddick to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Rich Hill and Josh Reddick, two players who were having fantastic seasons. That seems like the type of deal that the White Sox would be interested in. So why not? Why not have the White Sox trade away their future so that they could get Rich Hill and Josh Reddick from a team that was sitting at the bottom of the American League West? Now, the White Sox would clearly have to offer more than they offered the Padres for James Shields, but hey, it could happen. And if it did happen, imagine the world we would live in today, where Fernando Tatis Jr. is on the Oakland A's and Trea Turner is a San Diego Padre. Oh, how different Major League Baseball would be. All it took to escape this alternate reality was someone from the Royals being a little too impatient. And I'm telling you guys, we all could use a little more patience.